Hope everyone's doing well. We're going to get going in a couple minutes. It's not noon yet, so I don't want to begin. Social distancing working for everyone? It's working for us, and I think sometimes as painters, we're fortunate because, you know, with the exception of being able to go outside, and if the weather was better right now, I think we might be outside, doing a demo outside. As soon as we know the weather is going to be better, we'll literally schedule something for outdoors. We just have to find a nice place to paint. But for right now, we have to kind of work like a lot of studio artists work. We have to work indoors from reference that we've photographed.
So, I want to say hi to a lot of people already. Polly has been so great. She's always here. Stacy
Street, thank you, Polly,
Chicago.
very much. Anna's going to kind of prompt me and let me know. So if you hear another voice, it's Anna's voice.
Yeah, it's me.
And actually, we have a show opening tomorrow night, a virtual show. We were both in Cuba in January, and we've done several paintings. And so Stafford Gallery that's where our show is going to be. It actually is going to be there. But Christina Stafford is hosting starting at 5 o'clock. I'm going to do a demonstration painting, and during that, Anna's going to kind of walk around in our studio where we have all the work hung right now and talk about some of the paintings, along with being able to see them on the Stafford Gallery website. So, let's talk about what I'm going to do today, okay? I am going to paint kind of a landscape where kind of the rocky cliffs come down on Muir Beach as you're looking back towards San Francisco. Very kind of rocky, and you know, there's a lot of activity, particularly down by the ocean. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of inventing. I realize that, but that's okay. I think that's pretty good for what we want to get across. Probably next week I'm going to be doing a figure from a black and white folio and talk about how you begin to think about color and invention of color. So let's get started. I've got an 18 by 24 canvas here, and I've toned it kind of almost a skin color slightly. It's about the same value, at least as my hand. And I have another one that's a little grayer, but I thought I'd work on a warmer tone since I have pretty much cooler and neutral tones that I'm going to be working with. And I'm actually not going to...
your palette too?
I am not going to start with the drawing. On my palette, I have a little bit of yellow, just basically CAD yellow medium. I have a lot of white, and I've added some solvent-free gel to it to loosen it up. A big pile of of yellow ochre, which I know I'm going to be using a lot of. I always do. Just a little dab of a CAD red light because I'm probably not going to use too much of it. Lizard crimson, I have a relatively good amount of it, but not a tremendous amount because there's not a lot of reds, but I'm going to use the alizarin crimson in some of the darks. I have the ultramarine blue, which I use on, and I actually threw a little bit of a radiant turquoise on there because I probably may need that for some of the cools. I don't always throw it on. I could probably get it with other colors, but being lazy, I put it on there. I also have sap green, which is kind of a go-to color. And then I have asphaltum instead of burnt umber. It's my preference. I don't always have it, and so my order came through, and I have a couple of nice large tubes, so I threw some asphaltum on. Little bit of raw sienna, which is a real crummy brand of raw sienna. I will not mention the name, but if I need it, I can hit it. This green I have over here on the right is a green I mixed up for another painting I was doing last week, and I have a lot of it left over. And I threw some safflower oil in it to keep it moist. And then something I learned just recently, if I take dioxide purple and mix it with the sap green, I can get a rich black. So now I have two ways of getting a rich black. I have the ultramarine blue and the asphaltum, which will give me a great rich black. I also have the sap green and the dioxide purple. So that's what we're starting with. And I'm going to start with a big sloppy filbert brush. Large brush. You can kind of see I dipped in a little turpentine there. And I'm going to lay in some of these tones. One of the things that I want to do is I want to lighten from the reference that I'm at. I want to create a little bit more atmosphere. So I'm not going to paint the cliffs and rocks back here anywhere near as dark as I'm going to paint them up as they come to us. Keeping that in mind, I want to make sure I probably mix a little white into this color. So let's start with a little bit of the asphaltum, which tends to be, if I hit it with white, tends to get really red. And it's interesting because some brands of asphaltum tend to go just the other way. They tend to go really green. This is a Gamblin, which is, a lot of people ask what kind of paints I use. Most of my paints are Gamblin.
Mina would like to know if you would use burnt sienna to substitute raw sienna.
Yeah. Yes. You can use burnt sienna. Burnt sienna has a lot more red in it. I don't use raw sienna all that much, so I just happen to have a tube and I'm using it up. And right now we're just going to kind of lay this clip in. That's a little darker than I wanted, so I'm going to add more of that radiant turquoise, a little bit of ultramarine blue to it, and we'll go right back into it. And we're going to knock it back. So also, there's a little bit of turp in this paint, you can kind of see. And the reason I'm using this big filbert is because I don't want it to get too neat. I don't want to get too picky at this point. And I want to cover a lot of space quickly, simply so that I have time to go and do some sort of detailed information. Now, I'm hoping I'm light enough there. I'll go up here. There's a rock about in here. Some rocks back behind, which tend to be a little bit lighter. I haven't painted the sky in, which is kind of a mistake on my part. I almost always paint the sky in first. These are the other rocks back behind.
So why are you not painting?
I forgot.
Forgot to paint the sky in first?
So I'm going to paint the sky in right now.
Okay.
Very simply because it's dirty. It's going to take me more time to clean it. So I'm going to use a little gesso brush. This is a 1-inch gesso brush. I'm going to take my white, because the sky is very light. Here it's almost white. And I'm going to take a little bit of the ultramarine, blue it up, maybe a touch of ochre so it doesn't come out too raw of a blue. I don't mind that at all. You might notice I said I don't mind, as opposed to I like that. I don't know, I think I like that. So I could say it that way. And it's because I generally adjust as I go along. And I think that's something we all have to do. I'm going to go back to that line that I've used many, many times, and that is paint like you know what you're doing and assume you're wrong. There's an ocean line back here, believe it or not, right about in there. And I'll put it in there. But right now it's not that important. So I want to get an interesting edge. So we're going to kind of take this color and move it where it needs to be hard. And then feel a little softer. I like that area right there. So I'm kind of creating the shape of some of those rocks back behind.
Gabe wants to know, is Gamsol a good alternative to turp?
Gamsol is what I use. I call it turp. Yeah. Great question, by the way. That was a great question because sometimes for people that aren't aware of it, you might think it's a different thing. Gamsol is a form of turp that is less toxic. It's put out by Gamblin, and I've used it for years. Okay, so now we've got kind of our rock, our sky, and it bleaches. The sky bleaches down into the water. Okay. So I don't like that rock I just messed up, but I must admit, and I threw a little bit of the radiant turquoise into those colors back there. Now I'm going to start to come forward just a little bit more, clarifying some of these. I want to clarify that rock, some of the rocks that sit in front. This is probably one of the more difficult parts because you're value matching. You're really trying to get one area to stand out in front of another without overpowering it so it comes forward too much. That is probably the biggest problem in doing something like this. So, got some what we call contemporary drips there. You use them, sometimes you don't. I'm not going to. Okay, some darks back in there. Now we're going to get, there's another line of, and I'll show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it right here. I'll actually take the back of the brush. Sometimes you just do that, scratch it in, and that's what we're going to do in here. And I want that a little bit darker than what I just painted. So, same batch of color. I'm not mixing up new colors each time. Still got to keep it light enough, but I want to keep it dark enough yet light enough. So that looks to be big, sloppy filbert brush, so I can lay it in without overworking any particular area. You can also do this with a knife. And I'll absolutely be using a knife in this, I guarantee it. It's kind of fun stuff to do. You can be wrong. Rocks are kind of neat. People always say, oh, rocks are, my God, I'm doing rocks. Rocks are fun because you can be wrong. One of the things all of you guys should consider, and I don't think it's talked about enough by artists. I know many, many artists that become extremely frustrated. And
like everyone?
And it just said like everyone. Frustration can paralyze you. And it can get you to the point where you just, I can't do it. I can't do it. And, you know, I hate to use that old adage, you don't say can't. But truthfully, that's exactly what we're talking about. Don't say can't, you can. The thing of it is, you just haven't done it yet. And everyone will eventually get to the point where you're producing work that you think is pretty good. If you're not doing it right in the beginning, all I can say is kind of join the club, because I think all of us are artists. I think any artist you ask will tell you they didn't start good. They did not start good. They started and, you know, fought it. And what's more important is they fought through it. And that's probably the most important thing. You don't get anything out of these little sessions. That's the one thing you should take away. Trust yourself a little bit. Particularly with landscapes. Landscapes are kind of fun because you can, like I said, you can kind of mess around, try things. Oh, look at weeds. So let's keep on going. There's another rock. Oh, let's say it's right here, here, out into the sea here, right about here.
You're just simplifying basic shapes.
All I'm doing, I am exactly doing that. I'm looking for shapes. Because we're seeing shapes, we're not seeing lines. And in landscape, it's easier, and this is something you could probably write down, it's easier than it is in figurative work to just paint shapes. Because we're not dealing with anatomy. Or in figurative work, you've got anatomy to contend with. So this has got a lot more of the asphaltum in it. A little bit of blue and a touch of white. Don't want to be as dark as I can be yet. And I'm basically painting this middle cliff in, which looks like it's about here. And I want to get those kind of neat rocky edges, and that's why I'm using the the filbert, because it's not giving me a perfect edge. Big area, big area.
So if this were a studio painting, would you still be laying it in like this?
Yeah.
I mean, where you were spending more time than...
Yeah, I would. On something like this, I would definitely, because I want this thing to have some freedom. I don't want it to feel contrived and drawn and painted, where I paint every little edge just perfectly. I hate to say this because it sends maybe the wrong message, but I kind of want to start with some mistakes. And very super talented painter friend of mine, I'm going to call him by name, if he's probably listening or not, his name is Dan Cooper. And Dan and I used to discuss art all the time when I lived in LA. He was
Still
over.
do.
We discussed it constantly. And one of the things that we kind of came about discussing, and both of us agree with very much, is that sometimes some of the best painting happens when you're on the edge and you're making mistakes and you have to figure out how to get out of it. That's a little bit more of a mature approach. So if you're an artist that has some experience, that tends to be fine. If you're an artist that doesn't have an experience, very often that can be very frustrating. And believe me, after teaching for as many years as I've taught, which is almost seems like forever, which in many respects it is, it's 50 years, something like that. It's one thing you have to kind of explain to people is that get out of that mode of everything is going to come out perfect. You're going to hit hills, you're going to hit valleys, as we used to call it when I was in art school. And in the beginning, you hit a lot more valleys than you do hills. And as you progress, you'll hit more hills. So we're going to just kind of mass in some of these shapes down here that I begin to see. There's a rock here.
Brandon Hurley wants to know how you're mixing your darks.
I'm mixing my darks. I'm using primarily what I said right in the beginning. Right now, it's a combination of asphaltum. You can use burnt umber. You don't have to use asphaltum. Ultramarine blue and white. And then I have this little, you don't need the radiant blue. I have it, and as I went back, I went a little darker. This still is not as dark as I can get. I want you guys to be aware of that. I'll show you. Here's pretty much a dark. See how far away I am from really going dark? Now I messed that up. Now I have to get that out of there, which is fine. Sometimes in some of it, to get some variation in the rocks, I might see more alizarin, which I just threw in there. And I'll just kind of smear this color back in, maybe put a little bit of alizarin in there, kind of like that. Oh, that's nice. You guys probably can't see it, because basically cameras aren't going to be, it's like looking at some of your paintings in the, boy, I don't want to relate this to a painting in a museum, but when you look at paintings in museums, or I should say original paintings, you can see a lot more into it than you can when you look in just a book or something. So let's keep coming forward. Let's start in on some of these, or let's start in on all this, all right, because that's real active, and that's going to be my problem child in this painting, is that area right in there. There's not a question about it. So let's go there. Let's get another rock in. I got to lay masses in and then hopefully define the rocks later.
Hi to everyone who's taking time to watch. Hope you have a nice lunch in front of you and lots of friends and family out there. So thank you for taking time.
Yeah, this is kind of, hopefully you guys are enjoying it as much as I am. It's fun. I like doing this. I love the challenge of seeing if I can get something done. And that goes back to my quick study roots, I'm sure. Seeing if I can get something done in a time frame. And the first time I ever heard about that, I was a student at Art Center. I had a wonderful teacher named Don Putman. Some of you guys know, who passed away a few years ago, was probably the biggest influence as far as anyone had on me as far as painting. And I remember him bringing a painting in class once. It was a portrait of his son. It was probably 24 by 30. And he said, I did that in an hour. And it was very loose, very, very loose. And that stayed with me. That literally, being kind of a nudge and asking a lot of questions, I wanted to know why he did that. And basically, he said to see if I could do it. And I think I started doing some very quick studies for myself, not to show anybody. And originally when I first started doing them, they didn't come out very good. They got better, and they got better. And they informed me as to finish paints that I wanted to do. There was something charming that was occurring in those things that my studio work did not have. And I think it was because I was forced to leave mistakes and not make everything perfect. That's a hard thing to do when you're first learning to paint. I don't know that I could have done it early on, just simply due to the fact that I wanted it to look good, darn it, you know? And so I'm interrupting myself, but as I'm coming forward, I'm using less white. And I'm going to throw, I'm mixing other colors. So in that case, I just mixed some alizarin in there, just so you guys know.
Why?
Just because as things come forward, if you've studied color, warms, advance, cools, recede. Now, value has a lot to do with that too. But it's since it's forward, alizarin is a very dark warm. And if I put that in, chances are I can be fine with it. So now I'm going to hit kind of this gray area with all the activity. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use a lot more of the radiant blue and maybe not cerulean, but the cerulean will work if you don't have radiant too. It's just a little greener blue. I'm just going to see. This probably isn't light enough. That's not bad. Maybe throw a touch of ochre into it, and we're just going to lay kind of this light area in where all the activity is.
I was wondering.
But we're not going to start with all that busyness. I'll just kind of put some strokes in, hope they work, leave them alone. I like to always let other artists know about painters. So if you don't know, there's a painter that paints rocks better, I think, than anyone I know. And the guy's name is Matt Smith. And he is just a incredible, besides just being a damn good artist, he's a very nice person, but he paints rocks that kind of knock your socks off. They're so good. So I look at, from time to time, at different artists. Australian artist, Ken Knight, is a very big influence on me. English artist, David Curtis, is a very big influence on me in terms of landscapes. I'm mainly talking landscapes right now because these guys are primarily landscape artists. Okay, I'm going to mix some greens up. So we start to get some of these areas. I already have a nice little green that I think will work. I had it for another painting. And I have a lot of linseed oil in it. Or excuse me, oh, look at that. It's a little strong, but what the hell, let's put it in there.
Ooh.
I put a little bit of the raw sienna in just to mix it. It's really thick. Handle it right. I'm not going to have to go back and do a lot of work on it later. Let's get a little bit of it in down here. Little gobs of paint there, which sometimes I work at trying to get. This time it actually came out the way I wanted it. So I want to get this little row of dizziness in here. Go back to some of the darks. I want to separate that area right there as it comes down, and then it comes down into that light plateau of it's earth. It's almost sand. So I'm going to use ochre and white for that color. I'm setting it way over in another part of my palette so I don't contaminate it with all these other colors. Threw a little bit of asphaltum to gray it down. It was a little too yellow, although it is pretty yellow. And it's probably about that light. Now it's a little lighter, a little more white. And we're going to put it right there, there. We carves back in there, kind of sneaks up here.
Benjamin wants to know if pushing the brush backward against the direction of the bristles is hard on the brushes.
That's a great question. I don't know. I haven't had problem with it. That's about all I can say about it. Is it hard? Yeah, if you have, I wouldn't be doing it with like these lovely rosemary brushes. These are wonderful, expensive brushes. I wouldn't be doing it on those. These are big, kind of
hardy,
durable brushes, and you can really. I'm a brush junkie. I love paint brushes, and so I'm using just straight paint now. No medium, no nothing. Just going over it, hitting those real strong dark. That's just straight asphaltum, by the way.
Why are you doing that?
Because that's where the darkest darks are. And asphaltum, as I said. No, just for the heck of it, I picked up a nice glob of alizarin crimson there. And I just mix it in with because it almost mixes beautifully with that asphaltum.
You said almost.
Everything's almost. Okay, so we're going to leave that alone right now. It's almost working. Once again, almost. We're just going to, do the best we can to kind of portray all this activity. Okay, there's some greenery in there, but I don't want it quite as brilliant. So I threw a little bit more of a sap green into that, and we're just going to kind of lay some of these greens in here, up in here, sneak some in. Down the mountain, sneak some. There's some right up in here. It's that green with sap green. And by the way, and people are wondering about that green is a little bit of yellow, sap green, ochre, and white. That's how I arrived at that. Geez, about 2 days ago, I was finishing up a demonstration painting for one of my classes, and that's the color I needed. So we're going to go up in here, get a little bit more of that green, get a little bit of that busyness. Kind of, you almost want to think of yourself as a really talented abstract painter. Somebody who really knows how to just move paint around. And if you can kind of approach some of your landscapes with that concept in your head, it will help. So you don't try and be, because you're not going to be perfect. People go, well, how do I get all those certain qualities? And the best answer I can come up with is I'm really not sure. The best way is through scuffing and pulling your paint, pushing your paint around until you achieve that. If you try and do that like a rendering, like you're rendering a wonderful glass of water or a crystal vase, or you're doing a super rendering of some flowers, it's not going to work. You've got to approach it with freedom and fun, and have fun. I always tell people, literally, when you approach these things, just go for it. And if it isn't working, fuss on it some more. And if it still isn't working, fuss on it some more. Eventually, it's going to work. Eventually, it's going to work. So, another way to look at it is you'll really never do a bad painting. You may do a lot of unfinished paintings, but never a bad painting. Because any painting can be worked to the point where it has a nice finish quality. And that's just a matter of, the other thing that I can give, something is beginning to look overworked. Go back to where it was before it was overworked.
So scrape it out.
Yeah. You could scrape, and I just mentioned something. You could take a palette knife at any point and let's scrape. Well, I'm just scraping out back to that original color. And you want to hit an edge. So I'm going to use, since that was brought up, you say, take a little asphaltum, a little bit of white because it's warm. And I probably have some muddier colors in there like a blue or something. But what we're going to do is we're going to hit a little bit of in here, right about in here, the way the rock comes down. Oh, I like that. It's working. I don't like that. Why don't I like that? It's too strong. I'd mix some more blue into it because I just see a kind of an influence of blue down.
A couple of questions. Linda Monahan. Hey, Linda. Are you using water mixable oils?
No,
Just regular.
these are full-on real oils. I've used those, but only when we've been on vacation. So I've really not become really adept at. Actually, just so you guys know, I liked them quite a bit. I thought they were really kind of nice. I got some decent results. I've never tried working large. I've only done little 8x10s with them. I have a little travel kit that I make, and that's my experimental kit to see if it'll work.
I'm just going to check someone that asked last time about the brand.
Pardon? Artisan.
Was it Artisan?
Artisan. I think Anna actually took them to Cuba. So you might talk about how you like them.
I didn't take them to Cuba, but they're Winsor Newton Artisan. Yeah, that's what they're. I just took them out right here. I like them, but I still like the smell of oils. So I know that's probably a bad. And the texture of oils.
It's like any paint. It's not, if you're already paint well in oils and you paint well in other mediums, it's not a tremendously difficult medium. You just need to practice a little bit. Like I said, I've never tried anything large, so I cannot attest to how well I would do with large oils.
Yeah, Rosie uses them in the classroom with the kiddos, which was great. That's perfect,
Yeah.
Rosie. Hi, Rosie. Miss you.
I'm going to cut back into that now because I don't like some of it. And if you don't like it, wipe it out. Just get rid of it.
Daniel wants to know if you can mention what light setup you use to photograph paintings, and do you use soft boxes or diffusers?
You're gonna hate me.
We're really bad.
No, you guys are going to hate me.
Um,
What I do is I take 2 giant pieces of foam core, white foam core. I put them kind of off to the side of the easel that I'm going to photograph on. By the way, I'm putting a little bit of cool reflected light back in here. I'm thinking as I'm working, so I'm trying to talk, think, and paint at the same time. And I'm not ambidextrous, if that has any bearing on. Literally, what I do is set that up. I have 2 natural white lights that I put in my reflectors, and shoot those directly at the foam core, so I'm not getting light directly on the actual artwork. What I'm doing is I'm getting excuse me, I didn't like that, so I'll fix it. And then I look through my lens, make sure I'm not getting any reflections. If I am getting reflections, I fuss with the lights until I don't get any reflections, or not the lights, but generally the reflectors. The two reflectors are the white piece of foam core. And I learned this by watching a real photographer shoot artwork, and I noticed that he did not have light ever hitting it directly. Now, the other way is to get a real nice strobe system if you want to spend $1,500. But this works really well. I mean, it's surprisingly well. Then I always look at them on the computer. Once I get it going, I'm fine. What I would like to be able to do is leave a setup, and that's one thing I don't have yet, where I'm leaving the setup. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying not to fuss. I'm catching myself messing around a little too much on areas. And I need to keep moving. Because we're just about 30 minutes into it, maybe a little less. So I'm going to move to the rock behind it, which there I'm getting my most interesting color. It's a reflected blue. It's right about in here.
Oh, jeez. Seems strong.
That's about right, though. And I'll tell you what, if it's not right, watch.
Yeah, you can always
You don't have to repaint it.
soften
A lot of people think, well, you got to repaint it. No, you don't. Clean your brush and you just stroke over it again. You push it right back into that wet paint. All right. Now there's a little dark patch right here. But again, I don't want that dark patch to be really, really strong. Back behind that rock, I can also see a light patch, and it's right about here. And it comes up here. And, oh, it's actually got a little violet in it. I just noticed it. So I'm going to go back and grab my purple that I have on my palette. I usually don't have that on my palette, but I actually threw it on the palette today. And I see it right here.
Let's see, another couple things. Do you ever photograph your art outside using... Oh, hi, Hella.
No, I used to do that when I was illustrating. I don't now. I can't get the results I want. I've had bad luck. I know different artists find different ways of photographing their work. And for me, after going and watching a photographer, I used to, in San Francisco, I used a specific photographer, Don Almack, who was he photographs for a lot of the galleries. And I watched him photograph, and that's basically what I learned. He uses a strobe, but the strobe does not directly, it's reflected. The reflection is coming off of big white panels. I use foam core, like I said. You can use anything you want.
That's cool.
Just try to give a little structure and a little bit more light to that rock there. And we get a little light right about here. And up here.
Les was saying that he's been enjoying your demonstrations, and his friend Frank Ordaz, who's also having live demonstrations.
Oh, Frank,
Yeah.
great. Frank was a student of mine at Art Center.
Yep.
I've known Frank for, well, that was over 30 years ago, so I've known Frank that long.
Pat Leary wants to know if you ever tried these methods on the computer, Painter, Illustrator.
Believe me, I've
Photoshop.
watched talented people work on the computer.
Students. Super
I'm not
talented.
one of them. I don't do anything on a computer. So if I was a young illustration student today, I would absolutely learn it. Not even a question in my mind. And all I can say is, thankfully, I'm not. Because I know it's a learning curve, and I like the original character of paint, and so it's really hard for me to kind of embrace other than if it's for commercial purposes.
Speaking of the character of paint, when Tom wants to know when brushing, describe the viscosity of the paint, how slippery, and also Benjamin was wondering why do you switch from the knife and
Oh,
common
that's
thing with landscape artists to use along with their brush.
That's a great question. It really has to do with feeling. It's the kind of character you're trying to create an illusion of whatever is in front of you, be it a rock, be it a bush, be it a person, be it whatever. And so you use different types of tools, make different types of marks. And so you can't do with a brush what you can with a knife, and you can't do with a knife what you can with a brush. So part of it is feeling. At some point you're feeling like this isn't working, I've got to switch to this, or you'll look at a subject and you'll say, that looks like it'll work better with a knife. That looks like it'll work better. How do you know that? Trial and error, my friend. I wish I could tell you, well, if it looks like this, then you use a knife. If I told you that, I'd be giving you really bad advice. I'll tell you why. I watched too many artists work. Some guys work absolutely almost 100% with a knife and work beautifully, I might say, with that knife. Other artists never use a knife. I know an artist that uses not only a knife, actually, he doesn't use a knife that much. Working in acrylics, he uses everything from rollers to rubber brushes to a cloth. You can actually, if I want to, look at that. There's another. I just used my rag. Why did I do it? Just primarily to show you that you can use almost anything. Like I said, through exploration, one of the great things about doing these quick ones is you learn things. You really do learn things in doing these things. It's not a matter of just going, okay. A little behind where I want to be. But
And the viscosity of the paint?
The viscosity of the paint is pretty loose. I like looser paint. I know some guys like to use paint right out of the tube. I almost always mix mine down with a medium. And it has to do with, more than anything, it has to do with your own touch on the brush. I like to use a real light touch. And I probably don't talk about that enough. And by that I mean, I almost can't feel the brush touch the canvas right now.
So you're not even picking up what you've put down, the wet paint underneath, because you're lightly touching
And
it.
if your paint is very loose, has a lot of viscosity in it, then basically you can do that. If it doesn't, that means every time you put a stroke down, you're going to mess up the paint that's down below it. So it's really developing that feel, and that's the only way you can develop that feel is through exploration and trying things and see how you feel about it. Like I said, each artist is going to come up with, I'm going to use a knife right now, each artist is going to come up with something that they feel works best for them. So there's not a magic formula, it's like there is another talented artist, one of our wonderful teachers, Sung Kim, said to me, student was asking him to explain the magic. And Sung said to me, the magic is there's no magic. And I went, I got to remember that. I said, every time I say that, I will give you credit. Several artists have got great expressions, which are so true, and they get right to the point. Dan McCaw, another guy that, God, I've known Dan for almost 40 years now. Dan goes, every artist must learn to make frustration their friend.
That's a good one.
And I love that because it's beyond true. We've all lived it. Every artist working has gone through that whole frustration mode.
I guess Steve Gray said 43 years ago, Craig.
43 years ago.
Art Center, probably?
Yeah,
it has
Steve
to be.
was there. Yeah, because I left there 30
years ago.
31 years ago and came north.
Mick McGinty.
Oh my God. He's
Hey.
another phenomenal artist.
Yeah.
Ex-illustrator, terrific landscape painter. I think Mick's still living in Nebraska.
Chuck Todd wants to know, how do design and storytelling play into how you tackle painting landscape or painting in general?
Well, I tend to like narrative stuff. And in that regard, in this case, if I put the figures in, it would have a little bit more of a romantic narration. When I get into pure landscape, sometimes it plays an important part, but generally it doesn't, because I'm just trying to capture a feeling. So I would say more than the narrative or the storytelling part, I'm more interested in the qualities and character of whatever it is I'm trying to depict. Hope that answers that. I don't know that it does, but...
Yeah. And my brother Mark, hey Mark, wants to know if this will be available to watch later. And
I'll
yeah,
always...
it's on Craig's Facebook page. So we think, I don't know, we're trying to get the sound to work better by getting the phone in closer. We tried a bunch of different things with,
We're still learning.
but hopefully the sound is better today.
And Mark, who's on the phone right now.
Mix in Phoenix, by the way.
Mix in Phoenix?
He said, still trying to paint like you, Craig.
Wait.
Come on.
When did he leave? You still root Nebraska football, though. Oh, Mick golfs. That's right. I forgot. That's why he's there.
Okay.
And his brother Mark posed for me years and years ago for a children's book I did called I'll Always Be With You. And he posed along with our son Ian in Costco one time.
Buying the book.
Buying the book. He saw the book in Costco, so he went to buy it. As he was standing at the register, he turned to the page where there's a portrait of him as this character, and said to the woman next to him, "Does that look like me?" She looked at it really close, and she goes, "Oh my God, it does." And he said, "It is."
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
So, us old illustrators, I got terrible photos of people. A lot of them are really good artists. I shouldn't say terrible.
Explain.
We all pose for each other. I'm sure someone has poses, terrible shots of me too. But between Dan Cooper and Lee McLeod and Anna,
Tony and Lee.
and my sister-in-law,
yeah.
both my brother-in-laws.
Kids.
I even used Morgan Weisling one time. If someone was over and I needed a model or a pose, I always roped them into posing. Okay, so let's get that top part real quick, juicy. Have fun with it.
So by juicy you mean really thick paint, or
Yeah,
what are you talking about?
thick, but a lot of viscosity, so the paint goes on real easy. And because there's a lot of character. Look at all that up in there. See that light?
So you're just going for the essence of.
That's all you can do in an hour and a half painting. It's 18 by 24. That's about all you can get.
And would you approach that differently if you were just doing?
Nope, I wouldn't approach it differently. The difference is I would be a little more careful, and I would go back on. I would put more layers. So, in these hour and 20-minute paintings, I only get to put so many layers on because you only have so much time. If I were doing a finished studio painting, I like to keep as much of the freshness. This is my own personal. Just had a class yesterday about intent. Do you know what you're intending as you approach a painting? A lot of people don't when they first start. They just want it to look good. Well, that's fine. I mean, that's commendable. But you gotta have an idea. If nothing else, look at a wonderful, famous artist that is influencing you, and saying, what would so and so do? And hopefully we've all. I still do it. I try not to look back at artists as many times, but every now and then I was just looking at I have a great book on Giacomo Favoretto, Italian artist. And every time I look at it, I go, oh, God, I gotta get a little bit more ambitious. I don't feel like I'm ambitious enough. I feel like I'm copying out and doing. And then all of a sudden I'll look at a painting by the Australian artist Ken Knight, where it looks like paint just fell off his brush in the right spot. And I went, no, I want more of that. Probably his work, as far as landscape and as far as overall painting, the artist Nikolai Fechin has really had quite an influence on me when it comes to the character of paint. I know, I read an interesting piece by the abstract artist Hans Hofmann, who I didn't know, but he started as a landscape artist, And I guess he was asked at one point why he gave up landscape for what he was doing then, which is more abstraction. And he said, because for him, the paint was more important than the subject. I don't know that I can ever get to that, but at the same time, I know what he's talking about. I literally understand completely that concept. The subject is still important to me, so that's why I personally haven't let go of that.
So Barry Thomas said, looks great from Arkansas. And
There's a dynamite quick painter.
And John Poon. Hey, John Poon.
And there's just a great landscape artist, one of the best around, John Poon. And he knows I feel that way about his paintings. So
Absolutely. Cindy said, so effortless. Love the color decisions and
love the color. That's nice to hear.
color
I don't know
decisions.
if I do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Greg Ray said, love the Junko Thanksgiving cover he did of Margie's mom. Hey, Greg, those covers were so great. We used your kids.
We used them.
You and Margie for, what was it, Valentine's Day cover?
No,
I think,
Mother's Day.
Mother's Day, yeah, that's right. And our dog. Yeah, anybody. It was great. Gordy and Ellie, oh my gosh, they were so little.
It's fun to look back at some of these old photos that we, us old illustrators, and I know Mick knows what I mean, used, particularly if we're doing figurative work, because then we had to have somebody kind of get there and take that pose.
So,
Just stepping back just for a second, just want to see what I got. I'm okay. I'm looking at my time. I got about another 30 minutes, and we're calling it quits. So I want to move along. I wish I had more of it in at this point. Probably talking too much, but I don't shut up. It's a good thing you guys are here, because otherwise I'd be here painting, talking to myself.
Benjamin says, at this point, you say each time you lay down a color, at this point it's lighter, and then next time later, and the next time later, I'm not sure what that means. Do you work your way up from the darks all the way out to the lights?
I work kind of middle tones. Let me give you an example. I like to be able to go back and put darker darks into things if I need them. So for these rocks back in here, I probably won't, because the further back, the less information I'm going to put into the rock, meaning the less detail. So, I might go back into more often and give it, like I said, layers. And that's something that you really have to think about, is like, how far do you want to carry this piece? How much detail do you want everywhere? I don't want detail. I can tell you right now, I don't want detail everywhere. I want some areas to be, if you look at them, you enjoy the paint. If you think of Claude Monet, people love his subject matter, but I think they love his paint. They get a kick out of seeing that gooey paint. It's gooey paint when you're up close, and when you're at a distance, it's a lily pad. There's something about that has intrigued me forever. Not when I was first starting. When I was first starting, it was how real can I make it look? And after I went through that in school, I kind of changed my attitude a little bit to free. Several artists influenced me, and I broadened my taste, I must admit, in art. And I think that happens generally the older you get, and the more that you see art and you go, whoa, man, I wish I would have done that. I'm just cleaning up and refining a couple areas right now, but without over-picking it. So this area is the pain, I'm going to tell you right now. Let's see if there's anything else I need to do back here, back into some of these areas. So I want to go right in this area, right in here, right there. There's another little light spot I can see. It's about there, but I want it to sit back in that space. There's a little bit of rim light.
I hope that answered your question, Benjamin.
I don't know if it did.
And Troublemaker Sherry is watching. So happy to be watching after graduating 17 years ago. super lucky today. We miss you too, Sherry.
Everybody,
Awesome.
it's a
Yeah, we
shame.
do.
You know, we had to cancel our Italy workshop this year, which is
So sad.
a lot of people are not thrilled about, but it was a necessity. So, and we do those our summer workshops so often that we have a group of regulars that really look forward to it, as do we. So I'm going to try and lay some stuff in here and then add enough information into this area to make it work. Right now it's not working, but we can get it going. I see some, if I look in here, man, I can see all kinds of interesting things. I see a little bit of a blue part of a rock. One of the cool things about rocks is the variation in minerals in the rock create really interesting colors. So rocks are kind of cool, and you can be wrong because maybe there is a mineral that color in the rock. Oh, too dark. You just wipe it out. I'm gonna get an ocean color in. So I'm gonna use white, and I'm gonna try that radiant blue and see how that works. I'm gonna try it right here.
Would you say you're exaggerating color a little bit?
Yep. Yes, I would say that.
Okay,
I
that's
do
my
that.
own question.
I generally do that. I don't try.
To be too exact.
I literally do not try to replicate the exact color. I figure the theory that I was taught is you're an artist. Bring some of your own interpretation into what you're painting. And so I try to do that. Now way back there, this is all the sea back here. I could actually take this color and just push it in there a little bit, give it a little bit of that kind of color. And then way back in the distance, this is going to be too dark. Way back in the distance, there is San Francisco's back here.
Like a layer of fogish. Oh yeah.
And this is where you have to look. If you're on location, you're going to see it. Photographs, sometimes people will just look at a photograph and just glance at it and go, oh, that's okay, I see that. And they don't look into it. So you really need to take the time to look into. So this is there.
You can hardly see that in the photo. So.
Yep. I do see it. And I knew to look for it because
So where are you looking from here?
I am looking north from Muir Beach.
Hey, Jennifer.
Let's hit some. Got to scuff this up a little bit. It's too neat. Doesn't feel like a cruddy rock. Okay, I'm going to get some. Boy, I painted this whole thing with 2 brushes and a knife. I'm just saying that because I'm surprised. I'm going to take white right now. And I want to use a little bit of dirt in it. So I'm going to take a little bit of that San Francisco. And we're going to start to paint the white water. Because I've got to start to define those rocks. And that's what's going to define them. I had to put some medium into it. So we're going to, right in here, I see white water. And it comes all the way in.
So the paint's pretty loose.
Paint's very loose.
Okay.
I like certain edges I'm getting. I actually like. You know how that sounds. And we're going to get a little splash. I'm not even going to use that brush. I'm going to take one of my lovely rosemary brushes. And manipulate the paint with that brush. Okay, I'm going to paint. I got to move a little faster, you guys.
Diana said your painting looks so much more interesting than the photo.
Well, hopefully that's the intent. You never know if it's going to work. Always striving for it to depict what you're looking at, but add kind of, for lack of a better word, the artist's hand in it. that paint feels, it's loose, but it actually feels a little stiff. So I put more turp into it, believe it or not, or Gamsol, I guess we should say. And we're gonna go. More white. I'm mixing other colors into it just because I'm touching them, not because it's not a plan, but it actually works because you don't want everything to be that super. Now as we move into the background, God, I thought that paint was really loose. There it goes. We're gonna go here, here, down around these rocks.
How do you determine the direction of the brush that you want?
Someone asked that?
No, I did. I am asking questions. These are my questions.
You determine the direction of the brush almost the way you determine whether you're going to use a brush. It's direction. I paint with and I paint against. I try not to repeat the same direction. I'm doing that just because I want it to fade away. Mm-hmm. I want it to fade into the distance. I picked up a lot of dirty paint there, so we're going to kind of go in and we're going to paint some of the white caps in this. Not being completely white is an advantage right now.
Because then you can come in.
Yeah, because it leaves me room to come back here. I want to be able to paint. I don't like that sharp edge on that rock. There we go. Whether it's there or not. Also, there's a lot of activity, a lot of little rocks up in here. So I'm going to take some turp, add it to that brush. I've got hopefully enough clumsy bristles there. I can kind of push. Oh, that almost worked. Not yet. Other side of the brush. Try it again. Okay, let's leave it alone. I'm fussing with it too. There are little rocks back in here, so I'm gonna just give a little feel for all that activity. And if I have to paint the rock again, I will. There's another rock right there. There's a little light on this rock. There's definitely light here. There's white water right here. Comes down, separates these rocks. I just want to get everything covered so I have a little bit of time. Oh, almost 15 minutes. That I can go back and fuss a little bit because I haven't been able to fuss.
That's better.
Let's go in here. Whoops.
Ooh.
Almost lost this off the...
Wouldn't be the first time.
Who?
No, I said it wouldn't be the first time that it fell
No,
off.
believe me. I have done this too often where I've knocked it off completely. Now this is where you just kind of, you can't paint every rock. So if you think you can, unless you're going to give yourself a month, and you're just going to go over this and you're going to say, I'm going to paint that area. Now I'm going to paint that area. You can't do it. These demos that I'm doing are really more like a 1 hour study. And truthfully, sometimes studies come out. I've liked some of my studies better than my finished paintings. And I think I'm not the only artist that would say that. There's an energy and an integrity that happens. And that's the one thing about plein air work by you guys. There's
fresh.
Yeah, there's quality. A freshness that you just get, a spontaneity, because you don't have, so you have to decide what's important. What am I really going to put in here? And what can I leave alone and I really don't need to put in here?
Sarkis wants to know, hi Sarkis, do you focus on sharp or loose edges in your
Both,
landscapes?
both. Generally not too sharp, but doing rocks, yes, sharp. But generally you're focusing on kind of diffused edges, for lack of a better word.
And Barry, this will be on Craig's Facebook page, yeah, so you can watch it later, for sure. What surface are you painting on?
I'm painting on canvas.
It was a toned canvas. I don't know if you saw in the beginning.
Yeah, it was a tone. It's kind of flesh toned, for lack of a better description. I guess that I would call it more of a flesh tone. Now I'm going to put a little bit of some of these the feeling of the rocks in, and then I'll put a few of the darks in too, because I just can't. There's just no way we can get.
So many.
Yeah. So what we're painting is activity, and it doesn't almost matter whether you do it with a knife or a brush. I'm doing it with a knife because I figure I'd be faster.
When do you normally use a palette knife instead of a brush? What's the logic there? Jerry wants to know.
Well, it's very hard to define that. The logic is really when you feel you need a different character of mark. And in rocks, very often, that happens to be the case because they're harsh, and you can put a nice harsh palette knife stroke down. If it doesn't work, you can wipe it out, push it back into the paint. You can do all kinds of things. So it's something you develop because two other artists could be painting the same scene. They would use, one artist would be using it exclusively, and the other artist would probably never use it. So it's one of those things that you begin to develop a feel for, like a lot of things. Unfortunately, too much of painting is that, and that's why it's it's hard to teach, and that's why it's hard to learn. Heck, it was hard for me. I hope it's hard for everyone else, because I don't want to feel like I'm the only moron out there that struggles and can't get it right.
Oops. Well, there's so much activity like that. How are you determining
What to leave out?
Yeah.
Time. Time is a great equalizer when it comes to what you put in and what to leave out. Editing. If you don't have a time frame that you're working in, you can work a piece to death. And I'm sure many have. I have. And it's because you can't let go. You always see things you need to fix. It's one of the cool model is when the model gets up and walks away, you're done. Whether you're done or not, you're done. Where a landscape, if the light changes too radically on you, you're done. I've watched people sit there and fight a piece and keep painting after the light is radically, and I mean this, radically different. And it's like, why? Why are you fighting that? And leave it alone. If you need to touch something up, touch it up. But chances are, the light is so evasive. Okay, I'm going to get a few.
Does a study eventually turn into a completed work?
Occasionally, not really.
Will you continue?
A study is a different mindset. When you approach a study, you approach a study as it not being a finished painting. You approach a study with the idea of making beautiful marks, wonderful color notes, and observing. And then when you do a finished painting, use those things. You use that knowledge, but you slow down a little bit, and you're a little bit more discretionary. You can't be outrageously have a lot of discretion when you paint quickly. You just have to trust yourself Again, I'm going to use that line. Assume you're doing it right, but you're probably wrong. And if you just accept that, I mean, every one of these that I've done, I've gone back and looked at and went, oh my God, why did I do that? Why? So, you know, it's because that's how I see it. And I look, the other thing is you got to look at the painting. You can't look at your reference. You can't look at your subject. It's the painting that's the important part, not your subject. It's the painting that people see. Someone walks into a gallery, and they don't see what you painted.
It's a reference. Yeah.
They see your painting. And so that part becomes really crucial. And that's how you have to begin to look at your, almost someone in a gallery would see it.
Mick said, takes me back to 1978. You were full of great ideas then, and you just keep getting better. You convinced me that I need to use a knife more.
Play with it. I mean, I keep saying that. Have fun. I don't think that is emphasized enough in teaching, in school. It's just, you've got to have fun. Oh, we're visited by our lovely animal, our dog. I can hear him down there.
Right behind you.
He's right behind me. I will try. Okay, now that leaves me with about 10 minutes, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some lights and add a little bit of information. This area bothers me. It's a little vacant.
Just break it up.
So I'm going to take some of these lights that I have here, add a little bit more ochre, make sure I've got a lot of medium in that paint, because what I want to do is add, no, still don't struggle with that. Put the stroke down twice, it didn't go. So I want to get a little, there we go, start to get a little bit of marks, a little bit of light. Big marks, little marks.
Something like Jack Linwood.
Yep. Variation.
Speaking of Terry Naughton,
that's a point that I should bring up. And variation is what makes all paintings interesting. So you don't use the same kind of little tiny brush strokes over and over. You use varied strokes. So if you start repeating yourself, your painting is probably going to end up looking kind of boring. I'm just going to have to, I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to start scuffing marks in there. And I'm not going to overpick. Probably come out better because of that.
Hey, Terry Naughton. I just mentioned Jack Linwood, and that makes me think of you always. Great teacher at Art Center. Oh, careful.
Boy, we were lucky. When I was there, I had some great ones. When a lot of guys were there, they had some wonderful ones. I had Don Putman, Joe Henniger, Reynold Brown, Mitch Quinnell. All these guys were instructors of mine. Paul Souza. And I think of them often. I think of Paul Souza when I say to students, your mind will 5 years ahead of your ability. Which is outrageously true. It really is. How are you guys all doing with the social distancing stuff? I'm just waiting for the weather to get good so we can go outside.
It's not so bad. Just a little too cold there.
I'm a fair weather plein air painter. I'm not, John Poon, if John is still there. John is one of those guys that'll go out there. And John and I were painting one time in the rain in Carmel, and I finally went back in the mission and got under something, and I looked out there, and here's John sitting in the rain painting.
Cindy wants to know if you ever worked with Mikio Osaki at Art Center.
Who?
Is it Mikio Osaki?
No, I didn't. Depends upon what year.
How do you... Oh, Murphy.
I'm punching up some of these lights that I'm not getting back as often. The one difference in these quickies like this is that I don't have the opportunity to get back as often as if I were doing a finished painting. It's one of the big differences, by the way, you guys. In a finished painting, I get back probably every 5 minutes. I get back from that painting to see how it's looking. And in the quick ones, no. I get back maybe 2 or 3 times just to kind of see how it's starting to work.
Let's see. Sorry.
No, I don't know that.
He was head of creative back in 1999.
When?
Creative advertising,
Oh,
1999.
no, oh yeah, I remember him. I do remember him. I was thinking more in the illustration or painting department. That's why. I'm going to put some darks back into that midground. So I have the basic tone. So this is just straight asphaltum. So we add some of that structure back into the shadows of the rocks. Down in here.
Ow! Sorry. That's Murphy behind me.
We have a 10-month-old puppy.
How do you...
That is great, but he's
Come here, stay away from the tripod.
he's supposed to be taking a nap, and he's not minding.
Let's see. How do you edit the painting of a picture and still retain a good study? Murphy.
Say it again.
Come here.
How do I retain?
Sorry, I'm trying to keep it. How do you edit the painting of the picture and still retain a good study?
Oh, you know, a great way to edit. I just thought of this because I tell classes this quite often. If you think of what you're trying to paint in terms of, let's say you're thinking in terms of Impressionism. Well, if you have the opportunity, you can focus on everything because you stand there and study it. But if you look at whatever you're painting, your subject, whether you're painting from reference, and you close your eyes, keep them closed for a couple of minutes, then open your eyes for about 2 seconds and close them again. That's an impression. That's an impression. It's not, because you can't focus on everything. You see the basics.
Murphy.
And so that's what you do when you do these abbreviated studies, is you're basically painting, you're indicating all the stuff that's there, you're indicating it to you, and you're forced to leave some out. And if you open your eyes and then close them, and then open them for 2 seconds, and then close them again, that is what you're painting. And I think I heard this. Somebody told me that it's not, I would love to take credit for it, but it's not my line, but it's very, very true. And that's basically, I mean, I've never heard anyone else describe it that way, but that's basically what Impressionism is. You're painting that impression, that quick impression that you see when you just glance at something. And you go away and you know you didn't see everything. But it's what resonates with you as the artist.
Let's see, sorry.
So I can actually, this is where, now some of you have asked about doing a studio painting. What I'll do in a studio painting is I will take, painting might dry, and I might vary some of these colors. And that's the only thing that I didn't do in this, as I could, and right now I'm just going to pop a little bit of color into this foreground a little bit here.
Terry mentioned going to your workshops were the absolute best.
Oh, those were fun.
We had, yeah.
Silmar workshops?
We almost made 30 years and then went to another venue, but that was the greatest
We had a good group of
venue
people.
there.
These
So-
workshops, any of you have taken, one of the things when I do indoor workshops, figurative, I know Barry was here just recently, and I did a figurative workshop, and we worked from 9 to 4, take a dinner break, and then work from 7 to 10. And
Play volleyball in between or walk out in Silmar
we
Beach.
used to. We
Yeah.
used to.
That was
Now we
nice.
have a glass of wine or two. Okay, so This is a little bit more impasto, and you can see I'm pushing a few of those lights. And it's, someone was asking me, how do you, it's because that's what I see. What I'm beginning to see now is some of the really strong stuff that I could kind of punch.
Sorry if this is shaking a little bit, but
We're about an hour and 20 into it, so I try not to go much longer than that, just because I know I'll start to really over finish, which is, I'd love to do it, and I might actually go back on this piece to it, and if I do, I'll post it. I'll try and keep my time frame so I can let everybody know about what I don't like to. This is with plein air. I don't like to go back into plein air and work and turn it in. I like it to have the integrity of the painting that I did on location. And if I want to do a nicer, more finished painting, what I will do is literally do a finished painting. So I hope you guys got something out of it. I've kind of determined that next week what I might do is, because a lot of my old illustration training is paint a figure, torso, from a black and white photo, and talk a little bit about determining what colors to use, how you determine what colors to use. And then if the weather is good, we'll plan an outside thing. We'll go do something on location. But until then, probably just call this quits. I could do more.
He's right behind you.
I could do a lot more. My dog's right behind me, so I will. I think Anna will probably pull the camera back here. And I'll wish you guys get that.
I was trying to get to more of these. Tom Fody said that you and Dan McCall were by far the favorite paint instructors. 1978, 79. Wow, that's a long time ago.
Yes, that's nice. I remember Tom. I do remember Tom. It's weird. You know what I remember is roll sheets.
Yeah.
Because you'd have a semester full of teachers. But that's a real compliment to be ranked in there with Dan, too.
And Janet wants to know what Dan's up to these days.
Dan's painting like a son of a gun, man. Dan's style has changed so radically. It's really neat, but it's become super, super. I mean, this is realism compared to what Dan's doing. Dan has really gotten loose, and doing a lot of painting from his head, from out of his.
He has a great book out too.
Yeah, he's got a great book called "Strategy for Creating Great Paintings." I was fortunate to teach at Art Center alongside of some great. I had some great instructors, but during my teaching days, I was able to go to lunch with Dan McCaw, John Asaro, Joe Henniger, Don Putman, Ted Yunkin.
Oh gosh.
A lot of these guys. So what a treasure trove of great instructors that we had there. And not to diminish it, but let me talk a little bit about where I teach now. Academy of Art. I think we have some of the best painters. Xiaoming Wu, Tomutsu Takashima, Greg Gandy. These guys are masters.
Meyer.
Carolyn Meyer. These
Kevin
guys.
Moore.
And if you want to learn
Brandon
palette knife,
Smith.
Carolyn Meyer. She works almost exclusively, not completely, but exclusively with a knife. So there are some incredible instructors that I'm fortunate to have in our painting department. So, and then I love doing workshops because I like meeting people that aren't always involved in school. And I love, I like painters, man. I just like hanging out with you guys. It's just fun. I don't do enough workshops where I can really say, I do that a lot. So anyway, get the hang of pretty much what this is all about. And you can see, I sure didn't dirty a lot of brushes this time. I think about 3 brushes, so it's kind of unusual. Our dog's jumping around. Come here, Murph.
He loves this. piece of paper that was holding the table steady.
Our dog is jumping here. If you want to. Here, Murphy, come here. Come here. I'd like to say hello with Murphy.
There's Murph.
Good dog.
Yeah.
Anyway, introduce you to our family that is here right now. Please come back and see. We're going to do another one of these next Friday.
Perfect.
And I want to wish you all health, happy painting, and enjoy. Bye-bye.
Yeah, we miss you all. Stay healthy, everybody. And here's, that looks really cool. Nice. Okay, ciao, everybody. Stay healthy.